bad. It's our job. But anyways, stick around for the house that's coming up next. Stylist and the rich auntie, Joe exclusive, will be stopping by and bringing all his fabulosity to the show. Y'all have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye, y'all.
Grace and peace to all of you from God our Creator and from the offspring of his mercy, Jesus, who is known to us as Christ. We greet you here on Fox Soul Sunday, and all that is true, all that is noble, all that is high, all that is loving, all that is full of insight, ingenuity, resourcefulness, and compassion. Whenever we gather, we try to have conversations at a higher level. My goal always is to get you to consider, to get you to think, to get you to explore the possibilities of living a more excellent way. And it doesn't matter if you're already good, already saved, already doing your thing. There's always another level to reach for. We're always trying to get new thoughts, new ideas, new levels of imagination into all of us so that we might have a new life through the renewing of our minds. I'm never so much interested in making you just sort of, turn to a text. I'm also interested in making you consider a possibility, a thought, an idea, because that is going to change your life. You just reading the book is not going to change you, but you taking the book seriously enough to allow the book to make you elevate your thinking, that is going to take your faith and your family to another level. So let's begin with the consideration. Are you ready? We live at a time and in a place in American culture where manipulation proliferates. Most of the people that you know are engaged in the low practice of trying to control people, trying to convince people to do what they want, when they want it, how they want it. Most of the people in your life, even the good people, even the kind people, even the saved people, have an agenda. Let me help you with this. This is for free. You will never meet anybody who does not have an agenda. And if you are waiting for that, you're going to be waiting for the rest of your life. Now, it's not a bad thing for some people to have an agenda because some agendas are for your good. Some agendas are for your positivity. Some agendas are for your benefit. But to meet an agendaless person is an unrealistic expectation. People operate, regrettably, in the spirit of control, the spirit of trying to convince you, to manage you. It is interesting today because there are so many people who would rather spend time managing your life than controlling their own. They'd much rather be invested in the details of what you're doing than to understand better the dexterity of what they have already done. The spirit of control is a dangerous enemy, and this is why we're talking about this, at least in this part of this conversation, because the spirit of control hides behind the veneer of concern. Most of the time, control does not manifest itself first. It manifests itself first as concern. I'm concerned about you. I'm concerned about your health. I'm concerned about your money. I'm concerned. And people show up acting as if they care, only to discover that what they really want to do is control. It is interesting that people will appear to care when in truth, all they're really trying to do is manipulate and to fulfill the limits, the depth of their own interest. And that's why you have to be very careful. You got to be very careful before you open your mouth. You got to be very careful before you sign on to somebody else's agenda. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you? You got to be very careful before you put your name on somebody else's plan and write your name on somebody else's agenda, because you might not know as much as you think you do about the intentions of the person who's handing you the agenda. Let me give you some social media advice. This is for free. Never respond to anything on social media right away, no matter what people say about you. Always wait 3 days. Always wait 3 days before you respond. You follow what I'm saying? I'm about to help you, because in the moment you can be triggered and you can be talked into and convinced to saying something in 1 minute that it take you a whole year to get yourself out of. Are you following what I'm saying? Wait 3 days before you respond to anybody on social media. And if you still want to respond after 3 days, then maybe you should respond. Most of the time after 3 days, the world has moved on. You have moved on, and the conflict isn't worth it after 3 days anyway. But what I'm really trying to say to you is do not allow yourself to be manipulated. Don't allow yourself to be talked into saying something and doing something that is in contradistinction to who you know yourself to be. Don't allow your ego to convince you, here it is, we're getting to it, to convince you to speak beyond the truth of your knowledge. Because whether you like it or not, you are not an expert on everything. You are not an expert on most things. The reality is, when it's all said and done, when you factor it all in, multiplied, divided, added, and subtracted it all away, the only thing that you happen to truly be an expert on is you. In this culture, we have lost the ability to be able to say, honestly, I don't know. We don't allow people not to know things in this culture, especially in digital culture, especially in social media culture. Because in social media culture, you have to be omnipotent. You have to know everything and about everybody that's going on all at once. And everything is significant and everything is important. And the reality is, we don't know how to tell people that we don't know. We don't know how to tell people that we don't care. We don't know how to tell people that we are limited in what we can say because our knowledge is uniquely limited to what we have lived. It's interesting. It is interesting because we simply do not know how to be honest about the fact that there are limitations to what we can offer the world. People who think they know everything are deeply problematic. People who believe that they have something to say about everything, that every relevant thought out of their head is significant, are deeply problematic because they lack, write this down, curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of greatness. People who think that they know everything are not sufficiently curious. And when you are not sufficiently curious, you will never be greater than what you are, because curiosity is the beginning of greatness. Digital culture, you have to be the first to know something, and you got to be the first to share it. Because that's how you get your credibility and your validation, and that's how you stay ahead of the curve. In digital culture, you can't tell nobody you don't know. You ain't got the answer. You've never done that. You can't do that. Because if you do that, you are not ahead of the curve. And that's what all of this seems to be about. How can you be honest in a world where people are thoroughly applauded and celebrated for how much they chat and post and how much they believe it first? In this culture, you have to be the first to believe. Not the first to know, but the first to believe. And that's how you end up believing that the world is flat. You ain't gonna say nothing, huh? And that's how you end up thinking that Betty White is dead. 7 times you've reposted that. And the woman is not dead. That's how you end up believing that Barack Obama was really born in Kenya. Because you have to be the first to believe and the first to speak and the first to know without even realizing you're being manipulated and played with. That's how you end up taking medical advice from people who have never been to medical school, and most of them not even to college. That's how you end up getting political advice from people who can't even tell you who the 35th president of the country is, or the 37th, or the 40th. Hear me today. In this culture, write this down, we are always encouraged to speak beyond what we know. Social media has required that we become omnipotent. And let's go deeper today. Let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. Because people are always trying to present themselves as if they have credibility in an area where they don't actually have expertise. But speaking beyond your experience, write this down, is like living beyond your means. Speaking beyond your experience is like living beyond your money. Whenever people want to convince you to do something and to believe something and to go somewhere, you ought to ask them about the dexterity of their own experience. Don't convince, listen, there are people right now who don't have $20,000 in their savings account, but they want to teach you how to be a day trader. If you don't have $20,000, you don't even have $20,000 in your savings account, but you want to teach me how to be a day trader? If my mama was here, she'd say the devil is a lie. It makes no sense what we're doing. There are people right now who want to give you relationship advice, and they've never been in a relationship longer than a year. They have no practical experience on longevity in love, and yet they want to give you relationship advice. If you are not friendly, you cannot give me advice on how to be a better friend. Are you following what I'm saying to you? There are people who are willing to give you advice on how to manage your career and have a better career, and they've done absolutely nothing with theirs. Because we live in a culture where people have been manipulated into speaking beyond their experience. We live in a culture where people have been manipulated into believing that you have the right to say something when you have no authority to even open your mouth. Just because you Google something does not make you an expert in it. I rose to tell somebody today that there are some things you can only know in life and in living after you have lived it. There are some things you are only qualified to do and to say and to stand after you have lived it. Life has to teach you some things. Life has to bring you some places. Life has to raise you and let you fall. Life has to watch you be broken and put back together again. You cannot watch a video. You cannot read a book. You cannot check a social media post to learn some things. There are some things that require an analog, lived, physical universe experience. You have to live a little and then die a little and then be raised from the dead a little, then come back from your crucifixion a little. You have to be hurt a little and betrayed a little and then learn how to forgive a little. You have to cry a little, wipe your tears a little, straighten up your shoulders a little, put the board back in your back and straighten up a little and go back out into life. Sometimes you have to argue a little and fight a little and be resentful a little and then heal a little, only to discover that where you started is not where you ended. And these are the things that only living can teach you. These are the things that you have to know for yourself. These are the things you can't get off some soundbite that you got off Twitter. These are the things, the wisdoms, the deep and profound wisdoms of life. And let me remind you, as I have said in other settings and other places, I say it today that it might pour into your spirit. Wisdom is not born of success. It is born of failure. There is no wisdom in success. There may be victory in success. There may be celebration in success. There may be ebullience in success, but there is no wisdom there. You can learn in success, but you will not have wisdom in success, because wisdom is what you get when you don't get what you want. You cannot get wisdom from a video. You cannot get wisdom from a book. You cannot get wisdom from sitting in a classroom. Wisdom comes from the very stuff of life. It comes from the substance of your days. You get wisdom sitting at the table in the morning, going through the machinations of your day. It is interesting because I wish today that we would return to the celebration of wisdom. That we would return to the celebration of people understanding the value of speaking and acting out of the wealth of their experiences. Somebody asked me not long ago, Dr. Sean, what did I think about a certain celebrity? I was on a podcast, I suppose, and they wanted to know what I thought about a certain celebrity, and the thing was live, so I couldn't. So I was honest, and I said to the host, I don't have any thoughts about this person, and not because they're not worthy of consideration, but because I don't know them. I've never met them, never been in the same room with them, never had a phone call or a text message. They've never been on my show. How can I sit here in all honesty and authenticity and give you an opinion about somebody that I don't know? I'm going to wait for that to sink in, because that's what we've become. We have become a culture that we allow each other to speak beyond the scope of what we actually can know. How can you have an opinion about somebody you've never met? How can you have a thoughtful consideration about somebody who you have literally never had a conversation with? If somebody asks you about Beyonce, your answer ought to be, I don't know her. If somebody asks you about Chris Brown, your response ought to be, I don't know, because I don't know him. All you know is what's reported and what's said, and 2/3 of that happens to be a lie. but we have lost the willingness to be grounded in the wisdom of our own experiences. Today, we're going to undercut that. Today, I'm going to give you a more excellent way. Today, we are going to consider the truth and the value of what happens when we live our lives through sagacity and not gossip. When we live our lives in wisdom and not speculation. That when we are grounded in the firm foundation of speaking what you know because you know it. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
That judge looks like the mascot for all things racist.
The lawyer.
No, the damn judge.
TGIF.
This judge, though, is the exact opposite of the judge in Kenosha. Like, this judge has been checking the hell out of him.
Wednesdays and Fridays.
He may look like racism, but he's actually
you know what?
Really good
I take
judge.
that back. Hold on.
On Fox Soul.
I was talking about Kenosha. The problem is y'all killing too many damn black people. I can't keep up with all the damn cases.
I get emotional with these kind of things, too. I started in the pageant world, and I love seeing Black beauty queens.
Yes.
I love it.
Cocktails with the Queens.
There was a time when they were not trying to let us wear that crown.
At all.
Now, all the crowns have been won by Black women.
Every Monday night.
You just inspired me to go get my crown. Let me see. Okay.
On Fox Soul.
I love it. Yes, and the wave too.
I'll say it again. Judge Wamsley can pull up to the cookout. He's doing what needs to be done.
This weekend on Fox Soul.
I ain't one to gossip, but the people say Joe and Kamala ain't getting along.
Supposedly she feels like she's got her wings clipped.
Watch your favorite shows of the week.
Are you single, in a relationship, or is it complicated?
I'm in the streets. Now I'm playing flippers. I'm joking.
Fox Soul Weekend.
I always tell everybody I used to be gay, I used to be straight. Now I just want to get into bed and go to sleep by 8.
Our guest plays Terry Flannery in the hit show BMF, My Boy Da Vinci.
Fox Soul presents The Mix.
You'll have some big time artists and actors making appearances on the show, like Snoop.
I'm a huge fan of Snoop. Like, honestly, legit, he's the dopest person I met in the business.
Every Tuesday night.
My mom ended up smoking weed with him, man. He fell in love with my mama. He was like, don't be mad at me because your mama look good.
On Fox Soul.
What's the next question, Todd?
Don't get mad at me.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we are having a conversation rooted in the truth and in the power of sagacity. That's what it's called in philosophy. Wisdom. Not speculation, not gossip, not sitting around pontificating about things you have absolutely no expertise or experience in. Not considering other people's lives as if you become an expert on somebody because you saw them on television, or you saw them shake their behind in a video, or you saw them take their shirt off. No. You're not an expert on that. Today, this is an invitation to bring us back to the genius of sagacity. That's what it's called in philosophy. Write the term down, sagacity. Spell it any way you want to, spell check it later. Sagacity, what does it mean? It means to be rooted in discernment, in wisdom, in judgment, in acuity, in insight, perception, and depth. And that's how we ought to encounter the people that we love. You see, it's one thing for you to deal with the world in speculation and to deal with the world in gossip and to deal with the world in rumor, but we have brought that into our homes. We've allowed it to infect how we relate to the people that we're actually living with and loving and journeying our lives with, and have lost the ability to be rooted in discernment and judgment and acuity and insight and perception and depth. And people bring us serious questions, we give them sound bites and expect them to be okay. Our children bring us serious considerations and we send them to Google rather than having conversations that honor their questions with our attention, our time, our acuity, our judgment, our perception, and our depth. It's this wonderful story in the New Testament, somewhere around the 9th chapter of the book of John, and there's this man who practiced sagacity at its best. There was a man who was asked to lie. He was asked to say something about the master that wasn't true, and they wanted him to lie so that they could manipulate him to be a part of their agenda. You see how all this connects? They were manipulating him, and they wanted him to be a part of their agenda, and they were trying to get him to lie. And he was blind, and the master had made him see. And they wanted him to admit that the master had done it by some strange and demonic means. They wanted him to lie. Their aim was manipulation. But in the 9th chapter of John, this man says something that is rooted in sagacity, and it is rooted in depth and judgment and power, and it is the basis of everything that we're going to do today. He says to them, to the people that wanted him to lie, to the people that wanted to manipulate him, to the people that wanted to use him, he says to them very simply, you ready? I was blind, but now I see, and that's all I know. He says, look, I don't know nothing about what you're trying to do. I don't know nothing about your agenda. None of that. Your intentions. I don't know if the man that healed me, I don't know what he was before I met him. I don't know who he is now that I'm healed. But here's what I do know is that I was blind and now I see. And if that's not good enough for you, you got to call somebody else. I added the last part. You understand what I'm saying to you? It was his way of saying, I cannot speak about things I do not know. I cannot take you into a level of knowledge I do not have. But here's what I do know. What I do know is that I was blind, but now I see. What I do know is that I was sick, but now I'm well. I do know that I was suffering, and now I'm not. And this, dear brother, dear sister, is the ultimate manifestation of the deepest wisdom. The deepest wisdom of life is speaking from the power and from the well of your experiences. This man is speaking from his experience. He is speaking from his journey. He had just lived through this. And when you speak from where you come from, what you've lived, what you've done, what your hands have moved, what your eyes have seen, what your ears have heard, what your nose has smelled, when you speak from that, and not from gossip, and not from speculation, and not from rumor, and not from innuendo, and not from resentment. He was simply declaring his truth as he knew it, as he understood it. And I rose today to tell you that nobody can challenge the validity of your experiences. Nobody can challenge the validity of what you have lived through and survived. Your moral authority does not come from Google. Teach, Dr. Sean. Your moral authority does not come from Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or what's TikTok. Your moral authority comes from what you have lived. It does not come from what you have watched on a screen. There is no moral authority coming to you from what you have watched. The moral authority comes when you have lived something. The power, all the power that you need is rooted in what you've already been able to conquer and survive. And you are not an authority on places you've never been. You are not an authority on books you've never read. And you are not an authority on diseases you don't understand. And you are not an authority on people that you've never met. And you are not an authority on considerations that happened before or after your consciousness into the world. But you can be an authority, and you are already an authority on the life you already happen to be living. Your validity, write this down, your validity is connected to your life. And whenever you want to talk about something or give an opinion about something, the way you have validity is you bring it back to your life. If people want to ask you questions about speculative metaphysics, find a way to bring it back to your life. If people want to ask you about somebody failing or somebody succeeding, the way you have validity in that conversation is to bring it back to your failure and to your success. You have validity in any conversation as long as you bring it back to your life. This is not to suggest, this is important. This is not to suggest that everything that comes out of your experience is true. Because our experiences can give us false perceptions. We can learn false realities from people who did not know themselves. I'm not trying to say that everything in your experience makes everything that you say true. But I am trying to say that everything in your experience makes everything you say about your experience valid. Hear me when I tell you this. It's speaking from your experience gives you unimpeachable authority, because no one can tell you that you did not live that. And no one can tell you that you did not survive that. And no one can tell you that you did not beat that. Come on. And no one can tell you that you did not overcome that. And no one can tell you that you didn't come from that. Huh? And no one can tell you that you had to live with that. Your moral authority, your validity, your power comes from this ability to be grounded in the authenticity of the way of your life. When you sit in the river of your life, and you know the currents of it, you know the depth of it, the wideness of it, the wetness of it, nobody can come into your life and devalue or to devalorize the truth of the life that you have lived. Because when you are trying to be authentic, hear me, you don't have a need to be right. People who are just trying to be authentic are willing to be wrong, because the goal is not to be right. The goal is to be completely authentic with what they know, who they are, and where they've been. And when I'm authentic, I don't need to be right. I can be wrong and still be authentic. And people will correct me in my error, and they will still honor me in my authenticity. Good Lord. Are you hearing me? We have so many people who want to be right, who need to be right, who need to be first and right. And then when they are threatened by new information and new facts and new truth, or better renditions and better articulations of the truth, they have a social meltdown, because they just want it to be right. People who are authentic don't need to appear to be without error. In fact, being with error is part of the experience of living a good and valid life. And I say it again just because it blessed me. When I am authentic, I am okay with being wrong, because I want to be corrected in my error. But even in error, authentic people are celebrated because of the power of their validity. Authentic people are not trying to be the final authority on something so much as they are simply trying to tell you what they know. Simply trying to tell you what they've been through, what they lived. And that's what the blind man in John chapter 9 was trying to do with the enemies of the master. He was simply trying to tell them, all this other stuff you talking about, don't know nothing about it, but here's what I know. I was blind, but now I see. And that's all I know. If you want to know something other than being blind and now seeing, I can't help you. He was able to show us in his telling them that. When it is all said and done, the greatest authority on your experience happens to be the one who is experiencing it. Do you realize, hear me when I tell you this, you are a master right now. Come on, get this. You are a master right now. You don't have to run to Maya Angelou. You don't have to run to Toni Morrison. You ain't got to run to Cesar Chavez. You ain't got to run to Martin Luther King. You ain't got to run to nobody. You are a master right now, if you would but master your life. You don't have to run to some guru, huh? To give you all the, no. We love gurus. We love Dr. Angelo. We love Toni Morrison. But let me tell you, you're a master right now. You are sitting on a wealth of information that you have right now, but we refuse to value it and run to the articulation of things that we have no credibility in. This is an invitation for you to be the world's leading expert on you. This is an invitation for you to be in touch with yourself, and so much in touch with yourself that what people say to you is not information but confirmation. It's an invitation for you to be so grounded and so rooted and so deposited and so buried in the soil of your life that you know the minerals. You know the nutritional makeup of the ground that you're planted in. It is to be so connected to the wisdom of your journey That when you need to be inspired, you don't have to turn on a screen. You can think about your own past, and you can think about your own triumphs, and you can think about your own joys and your own sorrows, and you have the ability to inspire yourself. Imagine, if you will, a man coming along and telling you, I was blind 15 minutes ago, but now I see. Who does he need to turn to for inspiration other than himself? To be able to say that I am the dawn in the dark. I am the light in the dark. I am the thing that inspires me to want to get up in the morning because I was blind yesterday, but now I see today. I wonder what new levels of encouragement you might discover if you would just put your fingers and your face down in the soil of your life. Let's take a break, because you're going to speak what you know before this is over.
I'll say it again. Judge Walmsley can pull up to the cookout. He's doing what needs to be done.
This weekend on Fox Soul.
I ain't one to gossip, but the people say Joe and Kamala ain't getting along.
Supposedly she feels like she's got her wings clipped.
Watch your favorite shows of the week.
Are you single, in a relationship, or is it complicated?
I'm in the streets. Now I'm playing. I'm joking.
Fox Soul Weekend.
I always tell everybody I used to be gay, I used to be straight. Now I just want to get into bed and go to sleep by 8.
Hey Soulmates, it's Demi from Fox Soul's Black Report. I want to invite you to check us out. Fox Soul's Black Report is the go-to source for Black news, views, and opinions.
Now that this may be taken off of the table, you're saying to yourself, well, what else is going to be taken off the table?
We're bringing you the latest in Black politics, HBCUs, and more.
You can't do anything to a person to make them abuse you.
You are saving someone's life today.
Fox Soul's Black Report. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.
Mario fue pintor más de 30 años. Cuando Mario me dijo que tenía problemas en el trabajo, que se le estaban olvidando las cosas, fue difícil.
Yo le diría a la gente que le diga a su familia lo que está pasando con él. Y quiero que me apoyen, que me entiendan y que me quieran.
Our guest plays Terry Flannery in the hit show BMF, My Boy Da Vinci.
Fox Soul presents The Mix.
You'll have some big-time artists and actors making appearances on the show, like Snoop.
I'm a huge fan of Snoop. Like, honestly, legit, he's the dopest person I met in the business.
Every Tuesday night.
My mom ended up smoking weed with him, man. He fell in love with my mama. He was like, don't be mad at me because your mama look good.
On Fox Soul.
What's the next question, Todd?
Don't get mad at me.
Welcome back, everybody. I am convinced today that this conversation about authentically speaking from the web and the well of your life is valuable endlessly. I'm convinced today that people would be better boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and wives and employers and employees and members and leaders if we would value the wisdom of us. Value the joy of the journey in such a way that we would hollow it with our attention, with our storytelling, our time. Why is it that we have such vivid language for people that we don't know and such muted conversation about ourselves? Why is it that we have such wild and extravagant and ebullient adverbs and adjectives for the lives of other people, and we are completely without verbiage and syntax and grammar when it comes to the living of our own days? How can you have better sentences for them than you have for yourself? You know, all you really need to do, all you really ever needed to do, and all you will ever need to do, write this down, is learn how to tell your story. Is learn how to tell your story in such a way. We think that in order for us to gain attention and to have some influence and to have some clout, we have to perform in front of the world, perpetrate in front of the world. We have to posture in front of people, when the truth of the matter is that all the lying that gets done today will be forgotten because history will not remember the liars. But it will remember the men and the women who had the courage and the temerity to grind their way down to the truth. Besides, let me add, for no reason other than it's just going to bring me joy, that there is no power in a lie anyway. Lying about your life will only leave you broke and ignored. Did you hear what I just said to you? Lying about your life will only leave you broke and ignored. Truth is the path to freedom, and freedom is the journey to power. And when it is all said and done, history remembers the truth tellers and the freedom fighters who fought not just for the freedom of other people, but who liberated themselves, because before you can be a liberator of them, you've got to free yourself first. All you really need to do is tell your story. Tell your story. Listen to me. In your music, tell your story. In your art, tell your story. In your cinematography, tell your story. In your poetry, tell your story. In your relationship, tell your story. In your parenting, live your story. All of the wisdom, all of the genius and success that you need is hidden in the story that you won't tell. It is amazing to me, and I cannot deny the fact that I am completely transfixed by this, is that people who don't even know you will be connected to you the moment you start telling your story. I had a friend of mine who was a rapper, not having a whole lot of success. I can't mention his name. Not having a whole lot of success during one stage of his career. And I had a nice long conversation with him. And do you know what I told him? I said, you're a good rapper. You got nice music, but the problem is people can't connect with you because you won't let them into your story. And he started telling his story and letting people into his story. And the moment he did that, the moment he gained millions of fans, because people who don't know you will connect with you through the prism of your story. Everyone who's ever been rejected will be connected to you in your rejection. Everyone who's ever tried to love somebody and it didn't work out will be connected to you because of your story. Everybody who come from nothing, everybody who's overcame something, everybody's had to deal with something will be connected to you because you become the means by which they can actualize, realize, touch, celebrate, overcome, and have victory in their story. When you deny people your story, you deny the basis by which people can support you. Why do you think we love Cardi B so much with her silly self? Huh? And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean that in a way that is honest and almost celebratory. She's silly and joyful. Why do you think we love her so much? Not because she's perfect. She's far from that. And so are you, by the way. And so am I. We love her because we know her story. We know where she's come from. We know what she's overcome. Huh? These are bloody shoes. She ain't dancing no more. We know her story. And because we know her story, we root for her. We want her to win. And even when she messes up and does things that we don't like or don't whatever, we still stick with her because we know the story. Why do you think people love J. Cole so much? Because we know he tells us his story. He let us into his story. He does not rap from a place that he's never been. Come on. Huh? He does not, his music does not take us somewhere his feet has never been planted in. He takes us where he stood. J. Cole has taken us back to the house he grew up in. We stood in front of his house. And that's why we connect to him, because we know the story. Oprah took us back to the rape. She took us back to the violence and the abuse. She let us in her story, and the world loves her. People are connected to her, connected to J. Cole, connected to Cardi B, and they would be connected to you if you would only do the same. Instead of walking around here postulating like you know everything about everything and you're an authority on everything, and you can tell people they should be immunized, and you can tell people who they should vote for, you ain't qualified for none of that. But what you are qualified is to say is that I was blind. Give me a shoe, I swear to God. But now I see. And if you would just stand in that, all the power and the joy that you need, because pain is universal, and love is universal, and desire is universal, and joy is universal, and disappointment and fear, insecurity and rejection, and all of it is universal. And the moment you descend down into the particularities of your experience, the moment you actually become greater than the experience you're talking about. Did you hear what I just said? The moment you dig deeper into the particularities of your experience is the very moment you become greater than the experience you're talking about, because all of those things that I just mentioned and more are universal experiences. And the more you descend into them, the more people follow you down into the well of the wideness of it. You would be 1,000,000 times more influential. Hear me when I tell you this. You would be 1,000,000 times more influential if you stopped telling other people's story and started telling your own. I was blind, the man says, but now I see. I was blind, but now I see. I was hurt, but now I see. I was lost, but I'm found. I was rejected, and now I'm accepted. And when you tell that story, when you weave your way through that story, you will woo and win the world. The power that you want is connected to the story you just won't tell. I promise you, that's the moment you start opening up to it, the moment you start allowing people into the vulnerabilities of it, the moment you start making it a confession not of your weakness, but a confession of your emerging strength, is the moment all of us who are weak will look to you for confidence. If you want the clout, if you want all of that, you can have it. It's already yours. It's in your story. So during this break, make a little decision while I'm gone that you're going to start telling it. And we'll talk more about it after this.
Welcome to the house.
Well, thank you for having me.
Take a seat at the table.
What is your greatest obstacle in life that you are struggling with?
Honestly, it's dating.
Okay.
The house.
For me.
Aaron's figured it out.
Really?
Figured out how to date?
Every Friday night.
Share with me the tips, because I'm lacking in a lot of
I have a question about
You don't take dating advice from me. I got it.
On Fox Soul.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
Our guest plays Terry Flannery in the hit show BMF, My Boy Da Vinci.
Fox Soul presents The Mix.
You'll have some big-time artists and actors making appearances on the show, like Snoop.
I'm a huge fan of Snoop. Like, honestly, legit, he's the dopest person I met in the business.
Every Tuesday night.
My mom ended up smoking weed with him, man. He fell in love with my mama. He was like, don't be mad at me because your mama look good.
On Fox Soul.
What's the next question, Todd?
Don't get mad at me.
That judge looks like the mascot for all things racist.
The lawyer.
No, the damn judge.
TGIF.
This judge, though, is the exact opposite of the judge in Kenosha. Like, this judge has been checking the hell out of him.
Wednesdays and Fridays.
He may look like racism, but he's actually
you know what?
Really good
I take that back. Hold on.
On Fox Soul.
I was talking about Kenosha. The problem is y'all killing too many damn black people. I can't keep up with all the damn cases.
Welcome back, everybody. I am committed to the very simple notion that the vulnerabilities of our story do not leave us vulnerable. They ultimately make us more powerful. And can you hear the confession in this man? I was blind, but now I see. It's a confession, but it's not a confession of weakness. It is a confession of the journey that allowed him to move from brokenness to healing, from being half of what he was to being all of who he is. He says, I was blind. Can you hear it? He says, I was blind. Can you hear it? He's not trying to dress it up. He's not trying to make it look sweet. He understands that being blind is where his power comes from. People who have never been blind cannot talk to you adequately about the joy of seeing again. If you've never been sick, you can't talk to me about healing. You don't know nothing about it. If you've never had your heart broke, you can't talk to me about overcoming somebody cheating on you because you don't know nothing about it. If you've never made a mistake, you can't talk to me about overcoming and getting a second chance because you don't know nothing about it. I'm waiting for you to tell the world, honestly, I was blind. I was crazy. I was a mess. I'm waiting for you and I to get, what is the truth of your story? Can I just ask it? You don't mind if I ask, right? What is the truth of your story? What is the truth? Your real story, your emotional story, your psychological story, your financial story, your spiritual. What is the story of your soul? If your spirit could speak, what would it tell me about your life? Not your ego, but your spirit. I submit to you today that all the power you want and all the power you deserve is rooted in the story that you just won't tell. And it is amazing to me when people deny the fact that they come from a mess. If you come from a mess, tell it. If you come from dysfunction and crazy, tell it. I was blind, tell it. If you had to struggle with mental health, tell it. If you come from physical ailment, tell it. If you made some mistakes and that you're not proud of, tell it. I was blind. If you come from a family that is out of their minds, tell it. If you come from death and despair in your house, tell it. I was blind, the man says. If you hated your complexion, tell it. If you don't like your hair, didn't like your hair, tell it. Couldn't stand your nose, tell it. If you are ashamed of your poverty, tell it. If you didn't understand your mother, tell it. If you didn't know your father, tell it. Tell the story. Because everybody who has lived that story will be connected to you. You understand what I'm saying? You see me standing here on Fox Soul Sunday, you see me on the Book of Sean, but do you know that my mother had a 6th grade education? Dr. Sean, I don't come from doctors and lawyers. I don't come from learned people. My mother did not have a high school diploma. And this was the woman who, my mother did not go to, junior high school. Didn't even get into the 7th grade. Had to stop going to school in the 6th grade. I am the product of a woman with a 6th grade education, her mother died in childbirth, giving birth to the next child younger than her. She was raised by her grandparents. Tell it. I am the adopted, abandoned child. That's me. The woman that I was just telling you about is my adopted mother. My biological parents abandoned me, didn't want me. That's the story. I was blind. Stuttered my whole childhood. And now you tune in to watch the eloquent Dr. Sean. Yeah, he wasn't eloquent at 9. He wasn't eloquent at 11. He wasn't eloquent at 13. Tell it. Because it does not make you look less impressive. It makes you look more priceless. It makes who you are now magnified exponentially when people realize you come from a mother with a 6th grade education and you are rejected by your parents and you are stuttering as a child, and now you get to stand up as Dr. Sean McMillan and encourage people through the articulation of your words and your voice. It is a miracle unto itself. I don't need to look at LeBron James to be excited. I don't need to look at Beyonce to be inspired. I don't need to read Maya Angelou to make me want to throw my shoe. I just need to tell my story. Because there's some shoe-throwing stuff in that. Wonder what would happen if you just sat down and just told the story and realized that there's so much miracle and achievement buried in the details and the twists and turns and the ups and downs and the juxums and the fluxums of your life. I wonder what would happen today if you realize all the inspiration you need is already in the story you have. It is amazing to me that if people knew what you really came from, and if people knew what you really have been through, they would give you a standing ovation. I mean, they would literally stand up and just start clapping at the achievement that you are. But you deny yourself the ovation and you deny yourself the applause. Here's the irony. You chase after applause by living a lie, and you reject the applause that's available to you by not telling the truth. There's a melancholy truth today because this is an invitation for you and me to live a narrative experience. What does that mean, Dr. Sean? It means that you live from the fruit and from the power of your story. It means that you live not from your opinions, but you live grounded and the relevance of the narrative of your life. A narrative existence means that you are constantly trying to understand yourself and your experiences better. It means that you are committed, write this down, to the dignity of your truth. It means that you are not trying to speak for everybody. You are only trying to speak for yourself. Only trying to give postulation to the things of your life. You understand that your significance and your coherence is rooted and connected in your journey. And it means that you are committed to thinking about your life and not just your day. A narrative existence means that you think about your life without fear and without anxiety, and that you think about your life with radical acceptance. With radical acceptance. That you don't tell your story to relive your story. You tell your story because all the learning you need is in there. I'm going to let you think about that while I take this break, because this is an invitation for you to live a narrative life and not a social media one. We'll be right back right after this.
I get emotional with these kind of things too. I started in the pageant world and I love seeing Black beauty queens. I love it.
Cocktails with the Queens.
There was a time when they were not trying to let us wear that crown at all. Now, all the crowns have been won by Black women.
Every Monday night.
You just inspired me to go get my crown. Let me see. Okay.
On Fox Soul.
I love it. Yes, and the wave too.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
This one's for the real ballers and shot callers, the Sisterhood of Women in Tech. They're discovering cures, building apps, and programming the blockchain. They're CEOs, worldwide hustlers who can make it rain. They're tearing down the old boys club and seeing big gains. Because when women in tech come together, you know they make that change.
This is the story of a boy who is very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Welcome back, everybody. I am desperate, zealous at trying to get all of us to live a narrative existence. You ever notice that most of the Bible are stories? You ever notice that most of the sacred texts are not teachings but stories? They give you the narrative life of the major figures in the scripture. You ever notice that the Gospels are stories and not just a collection of teachings? Have you ever noticed that? That the 4 major books by which we have to get to know the founder of the Christian faith are a collection of stories, what he did, how he lived, what he said, who he helped, and not just do this, do that, don't go here, don't go there. That's not, the basis of Christian doctrine is rooted in narrative. It's rooted in you tracking the story of a man, tracking the story of someone that we believe was more than a man. It is embracing the truth of his narrative is the thing that gives you access to his power. For example, we know what? We know that he was rejected by his father's family, and that when they went to have him in Bethlehem, he was born in a barn. Not in a hospital, but born in a barn. He was a barn baby. Why is that important? Why is that part of his narrative important? It is important because it is a sign and a symbol for all of us who've ever been rejected. That you can be born in a barn and rejected by people who are supposed to care about you, and you can still end up being the most important man in the world. Did you have a shoe? No? It goes to show you that the system can lock you out. The system cannot let you in. The system can keep you completely isolated, and you still end up with people talking about you 2,000 years later. That's the power of the story. Born outside of the system, died outside of the system, so that all of us who have been locked out and treated bad by the system would know that you don't need the system to validate you in order for you to have the life that God wants you to have. Herod tried to kill him, and Satan tried to tempt him, and sinners could not resist him, death could not destroy him, and the grave could not hold him. That's the story. And when I went through that little part right there, didn't your faith stand up? Didn't you just feel a little bit inspired? Because I just walked you through the story. Because the power of the life is in the story. The story is power. And the story is not just his power, it's his legacy. It is called the greatest story ever told for a reason. And what would you say if I told you that the greatness of your story is no less diminished by the understanding of the telling of his? That he doesn't just want you to tell his story, he wants you to connect your story and his story, and that the telling of these two stories together create a new person. Woo, God, if I had a brick, I'd throw it at the camera. Did you hear what I'm telling you, man? That the intertwining of these stories, that's what creates a new human being, a new person, a new mind. When you tell your story side by side and next to his story, and somewhere along the way, the two stories kiss each other. They connect and create a new version of who you are. And you're able to look at people and say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know nothing about that. I ain't never been there. But here's what I do know. I was blind, but now I see. It is amazing today, because I would submit to you, I'm almost done, I would submit to you that there's $100 million hiding in your story. $100 million hiding in your story. And we like to speak about experiences we never had and places we've never been, because we think our lives are so mundane and simple and uneventful and unimportant, and we don't realize that there's divinity in your story. There are explosions of possibility in your story, miracles hiding in your story, despair and discouragement overcome by tomorrow in your story. $100 million in your story, unlikely achievements in your story, tremendous sacrifices, resilience and joy and sorrow and love unrequited, love getting. There's good sex in your story. There's bad sex in your story. Death, dread, disease, and despair, all in your story. Betrayal and sacrifice and commitment, all in your story. Did I mention there's $100 million too in your story? Hear me today. Hear me when I tell you this. You refuse to tell this story, and I got to convince you to stop it. Tell it. I wish you would honor it more. I wish you would tell it more. You just think your story is something that happened. You don't yet believe that your story is something to learn from, to grow from, to report on, to ruminate about. I wish you would study it. I wish you would teach it. I wish you would lean into it. I wish you would lean into the light of it. I wish you would taste the darkness of it. Do you know that Toni Morrison traveled the world? She traveled the globe, all over the world. Hear me when I'm saying this to you. She traveled the globe, but most of the books for which she is famous happened to be about the little town that she came from in Ohio. She went to Paris and to Rome and to London and to Japan and to Africa. But the stories that made her famous are the stories that reflect where she comes from. Her fame, her power did not come from writing about London or writing about Paris or Johannesburg or even New York City. Toni Morrison built her genius and her fame on writing about that little town, Elyria in Ohio. She understood that her greatness was connected to where she came from. Whew. Let me give you some advice. You ready for this? You don't have to go far in order for you to dig deep. You can drop your shovel right where you are and start digging, and I promise you, before it's all over, you're going to strike gold and oil or water or wisdom or something. Because that soil underneath you that keeps you standing is not without a treasure. If you just start digging, you're going to find gold or oil or water or wisdom or joy or inspiration but there's something in the ground. Come back to what you know, beloved. Come back to what you know, and come back to where you have lived and what you have lived, and come back to being able to tell people, all I know is this. I was blind, but now I see. I was down, but now I'm not. I was a mess, but I'm not quite so messy. I'm so glad that we had this chance together. I'm so glad we had this conversation. And I want to give you some homework and some work. You ready? For the rest of your days, for the balance of your life, live from the power of your story. And let other people speculate and gossip. You stand in the power of what you have survived. I want to thank you for being a part of Fox Soul Sunday. And I pray, my deepest prayer is that you will go forth in the strength that you deserve. Tell your story, beloved. Tell it every chance you get, because the power is contained therein. I'll see you next time.
When the storm of life is raging, stand by me. Stand by me.
It really was God's assignment in my life. And that was 29 years ago. And I can't imagine having done anything else for the past 29 years.
Della Clark is the CEO of the Enterprise Center, a nonprofit